And here we go. We have liftoff.
Propulsion continues to be nominal.
R68 chamber pressure looks good.
Rolling up. Roger, roll, Atlantis.
Water towers fly! Yes!
Tango down to nominal.
Fighting outside ST off. Bring in ST off. Off. It's orange!
Orange 25! Oh my god! Oh my god!
Decollage.
What is it?
Put that in the big bag, Eagle.
343 unfolds to go.
Indeed.
We rise together, back to the moon and beyond.
This methane will be igniting in the flare, correct?
Yikes. You dead? We don't need any more of these.
Good late evening. You are taking a live look right now at Space Launch Complex 40 at the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida, where we are set to see the launch of 24 more Starlink satellites on this 6-65 mission. I am Sawyer Rosenstein, and I will be your host for today's launch stream, which liftoff counting down to about 57 minutes from now, which is around midnight local time. I, of course, am not alone through all of this. I am joined by a fantastic team of talented talkers, including Alex. How's it going, Alex?
You tried.
I did.
Yeah, I noticed that you really tried. Hello, everyone.
It came out better than I thought it was going to from the start of the sentence, so I'll take it. Also joining us for the talking from the field is D-Wise. D, how's it going?
It is going great. It is a gorgeous day out here. A bit of a breezy and chilly evening here in Florida, but we have a vertical rocket on the pad getting ready for launch. So it is a great day.
Yes, you could see that breeze from the American flag at the KSC press site there. And there is that rocket, of course, that D is talking about. So we have to, of course, thank Kevin Michael Reed for bringing us the views, who will be pushing the buttons, pulling the levers, and making everything appear on your screens for this launch. Now, speaking of the rocket that's on screen, Alex, can you kind of give us a rundown of what this mission is and what booster we're looking at?
Yeah, so we have another Starlink launch, but this time there's some special stats that I would like to mention. First of all, as usual, I'm gonna go through the usual rundown, right? This is 24 Starlink V2 mini satellites, right? And they are being launched. This is group 6, which means it is going to a 43-degree inclination, and that means it is going southeast out of Florida, and so it's gonna go into that 43-degree inclination orbit. It's gonna do the booster usual ascent portion, right? Second stage is gonna perform 2 burns, one to get into a parking orbit, and then a second one to circularize the orbit. Satellites will deploy, and the second stage will then come down over the Indian Ocean for disposal. Now, one of the interesting things for today, though, downrange in the area is just read the instructions. This will be the 100th landing attempt on that drone ship, so I'm really excited for that. And this booster that you see there on screen, that is B1083, it's launching for a 6th time. It is having a 25-day turnaround, as you can see there. And a little bit beyond that, it kind of depends on whether it goes at the top of the window or we delay here into the window. We'll also talk about that. I'm mostly sure about that. But you can see there the history: Crew 8, Starlink 648, Starlink 656, Polaris Dawn, and most recently CRS-31 just earlier this month. So a very quick, kind of flight history, if you will. And
quite
that's the trajectory.
And quite a varied flight history at that. Besides just Starlinks, you've got the highest orbit that humans have been to since the Apollo missions. You've got a resupply mission at the ISS, and now a southeasterly Starlink.
Exactly. There's the trajectory southeast out of the Cape.
And D, we've got the fleet ready downrange, right?
Absolutely. As Alex mentioned, just read the instructions is positioned downrange for this booster's landing. Of course, it's not just the booster getting recovered today. The fairings will be picked up by Bob. And as you mentioned, it is a southeast trajectory. So those boats are like down by the Bahamas. I'm hoping it's a little warmer there. The crew can like enjoy a break from the breezy, chilly Florida weather right now.
Yeah, how is the weather where you're at the Cape?
You know, it's pretty good, all things considered. I am cold as someone who lives in Florida. I know most people would not consider, I think, like 57, 60 degrees, all that cold. The weather is looking pretty good launch-wise, though. They're keeping an eye on the thick clouds rule, as well as the liftoff winds rule. Just a couple minutes ago, we heard the strong wind warning, which has been going on for a lot of different KSC areas. That has been terminated, so that's a good sign because liftoff winds were one of the concerns here. So that warning had been 25 gusting to 35 knots, I believe. But if that wind has come down a bit, that is definitely a good sign. And the other thing that SpaceX is keeping an eye on a bit tonight is the upper level wind shear, which is one of the additional risk criteria that's not factored into the 15% probability of violation. And that upper level wind shear has a rating of low to moderate. So looking around out here, there definitely are some clouds on the wider camera. You might be able to see the clouds illuminated by like the pad lights. Of course, that shot you saw the flag blowing in the wind. So it is definitely still breezy out here, but I'm hoping that it clears up a bit and we can have another gorgeous launch. If not, either way, we're gonna know in about 52 minutes.
Exactly. And if there's something you want to know and you have a question, reminder you can tag us at NASA Spaceflight and we will do our best to answer as many of your questions as we can throughout the stream. Now, Alex, you mentioned something interesting because obviously D pointing out we're a little
Yeah.
under 52 minutes from the top of the window, but it turns out, and this is Inception kind of level here, there are windows within the windows.
Yeah, for at least the last couple of weeks, SpaceX has been a bit weird with their Starlink launch windows. So, usually for those that may not know about this, usually this is Starlink launch windows. The big one, right, covers about 4 hours. So today the launch window goes from 12 a.m. Eastern or 500 UTC to 4 a.m. Eastern, so 4 hours. 900 UTC will be that end of the window. However, in the past, what we had, right, is within that window, there will be a bunch of instantaneous T-zeros, so to speak. So you will have sort of like, I don't know, pepperoni on a pizza. You spread out all of those T-zeros, right? And you've got a very nice list of T-zeros available for SpaceX. They have changed that method in the last couple of weeks. They have now what I called sub windows, essentially smaller windows within the big window where that T0 could land on, right? And so, just to put an example, the first one of today's window is from 12 a.m. and 0 minutes and 0 seconds, like 12:00:00 a.m. to 12:00 and 40 seconds a.m. So it's just a 40-second window within like sort of the first. There you go. Thanks, Kevin. And so those are the 10 sub windows that we have. Some of them are short, as short as just 40 seconds long, and it could land on any of these. And so one of the things as well is that the SpaceX website currently says 12 a.m. Eastern, right? But that could mean it's probably, since they don't put the seconds, you could think, oh, well, it could be 00 seconds. It could be 10 seconds. It could be 20 seconds, 30 or 40. Normally what they do is, they don't do something like 12 seconds or 15 seconds. Usually on the 10s, like 00, 10, 20, 30, 40, etc., right? So that at least makes it a little bit easier. But again, it's a bit of a chaos, right? So this is our warning for those watching that if you see that the clocks maybe do not fully line up, that's probably why. And we're gonna figure it out, right? On our very lovely T-10 minute event. We all know already by now that is a T-minus 20 minute and 20 second on the count. So we see that it's off, say, it's off by 12 seconds. Well, maybe it's because it's 10 seconds later or something like that, right? Into the window. There you can see that timeline. We're still 10 minutes away from that potential go for propeller load from the launch trajectory, which unfortunately we no longer get that kind of coverage from SpaceX of like the countdown nits and whatnot. But usually they either tweet or or we see some kind of signs, especially once that propeller load starts at T-minus 35 minutes. They load liquid oxygen on the first stage. It gets chilly and frosty about a few minutes later. So that'll be our indication on whether they're going at the opening of the window or not. Hopefully they do, because it's a very late night today for everybody involved. So please go on time.
I need to go back to the pizza analogy. First off, brilliant. Second off, I gotta figure this out here. So if that's the pepperoni, then would these little windows be like you drizzle ranch on it, so it's kind of spread out, but it's not everywhere on the pizza?
I don't know. You know what? Now I'm hungry.
I'll give you a second to think about that one. In the meantime, if your mind is a little confused looking at our countdown timeline, well, it's because our timelines aren't huge fans of changing over local time from one day to the next. So that's why somehow the times are going up as the window progresses rather than the times decreasing because launch is scheduled for at midnight. So a unique bug to the system there. Some might call that the pineapple on pizza of timelines. Either of you, pineapple on pizza, yay or nay? Disabled Park Hopper wants to know.
Okay, I have to say it depends on the type of pizza. There are times when pineapple pizza is a yay. However, if it's a like proper quality pizza, it's always a nay. Like if I'm getting cheap pizza, I'd take pineapple on it. That adds some flavor. That could be good. But if I'm getting a nice pizza, it absolutely does not have pineapple on it.
Alex? Ooh, the mystery, the silence.
Oh, sorry.
Pineapple on pizza.
I'm not a lover of pineapple in pizza. I'm gonna say straight, I am not really. No, it's not my thing.
To me, just the weird part is the temperature when it's on pizza. I love pineapple. I would put pineapple on almost anything. It's just weird when it's warm with the warm pizza. I don't hate it. I'm not totally against it. It's just not my go-to.
That's totally fair. That's a very reasonable take of pineapple on pizza.
To the person who said not as bad as my friend who recommended spinach on pizza, spinach is one of my favorite pizza toppings. Deal with it.
I don't get spinach on my pizza, but it seems healthy. I don't know. I feel like it could be good.
Now that we've divulged into everyone being hungry in the middle of the night for where each of us is located, let's continue along here. I do want to thank some people for their support before the stream even went live. Randy Stanford, thank you for becoming a PadRat member. Andy Tyler becoming a Red Team member. Felix also becoming a Red Team member. And Element 115, thank you for becoming a Capcom member. Reminder, Capcom and above gets access to the NSF Discord. You also get the pre and post show for the Flame Trench, which is our Friday show that was on earlier today. So check that out. And you get to debate whether what Jack calls a bagel is really a bagel. Spoiler, it's not. And P. Davison RN, thank you for becoming a PadRat member. And just now, Ken Schaefer gifting 20 Red Team memberships. If you did get one of those gifted memberships, please make sure to give them a big thank you. And also, by the way, I should point out that Kevin Michael Reed is a nay to the pineapple on pizza question. Let's see here. Take some more questions that you had. D, since you're the one out there in the weather, how much of how much does humidity play as a factor with these launches? It's not so much the launch itself as it is kind of what you get to see and hear, right?
Yeah, so it affects a lot of things. If there's a high humidity and the temperature is lower, that creates complications where we've got condensation forming on lenses and that sort of stuff. It doesn't really affect the launch itself too much. Humidity itself doesn't. It can start to play a role when they're looking at like the electric fields rule and the like triboelectrification rule, where if a rocket is going, and it basically means if the rocket is able to cause lightning as it flies through the air, like if there are clouds and the like. So it plays a role, but mostly through other rules and the likes of clouds in the area. So right now, humidity is 85% here. I mean, yeah, it's Florida. So what do you really expect? It's a high humidity. Over the next few days, actually, the humidity is dropping, which is kind of cool to see. It's looking like it's going to be down in the like 50 to 60% humidity come next week. So that'll be cool. But right now, yes, it is very, very humid.
Yeah, I mean, typically it can make for better sound, especially if there's a lower cloud layer. But I feel like with the thickness in the air, especially the Florida humidity, the sound sometimes can just kind of hang around you, which means it lasts a little bit longer and it just gives that little extra kick to it sometimes.
Absolutely. So, those of you who tuned into the Flame Trench 2 weeks ago or member streams, we had talked with Kent Gee at BYU, who's been doing a ton of stuff with his students learning about rocket sound. And he's gotten a lot of information. And I'm sure if we talked to him, he could give us an even better explanation beyond the like personal experience, like a data driven explanation on how humidity affects those launch audio.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. It's one of those again, you've seen enough launches, you get that just the way the clouds are, the way the air is, these tiny little details can make a launch sound completely different from the same launch you saw maybe 3 days ago.
Absolutely. If the wind is going the right or wrong direction, it will dramatically change your sound. So a couple days ago, we had a late night Starlink from 39A. The sound from that one was just gorgeous. It was reasonably still air, but I believe coming slightly in my direction from the launch pad. It was a crystal clear night. There were no clouds, and yet the the audio that time was just brilliant. We've also had others where the fog is so bad you cannot see the rocket, and yet because the air is so dense, I guess it transferred the sound better, and it was like one of the loudest launches that I've seen. That was a Falcon Heavy.
And
So
ROL
and
44.
you know it, and so I
Oh, I
can't
know
even
it.
say that I saw that launch because I did not see that launch at all, but I did hear that launch.
Yeah, I think I saw it for 3 whole seconds of that launch. All the ones that ended in 44 were cursed. Oh, sorry, no, USSF 54. NRL 44 was the cursed Delta 4 Heavy. USSF
Yes.
44 was the cursed Falcon Heavy through the clouds.
Yeah. The 44 missions had a way of being unique, that's for sure. Oh,
Yeah. Uh, let's see here, Alex Cooper with 2 good questions, and they all kind of relate to things that you and the team over at Space Coast Live, our 24/7 Space Coast cameras, caught while taking a look at 39A. Uh,
Uh-huh.
Cooper's wondering if we know how they're going to transport Starship to Florida, but we saw cranes already working on the tower area, and also asking what about those extended fairings that we saw?
Oh, okay. So those are two different things. Uh, so I'll go first with the Starship stuff. So how they're gonna be moving that, I have no idea. But very sort of, how to say this in a very simple way. One could think, oh, maybe they're gonna barge it, right? How they're gonna do it, how that logistics will look like, I cannot even, begin to think about how complicated that'll be. But it's very clear that they will not be able to have their own factory running anytime soon because it takes a while to build that up, right? Like even at their speed, it takes time, as we've seen with like Mega Bays. Mega Bay 1 and Mega Bay 2 Starbase, they each took about a year from start of foundations to any vehicle being inside, let alone being stacked and produced and, et cetera, right? The Star Factory is still being built. It's still being, put together. Like, of course, it's already turning out vehicle parts, but bottom line is it takes a while, and they want to launch very quickly from there. Like, they really, really are trying to get Starship out of there soon. So if they want to do that, they obviously need to move some of these vehicles to Starbase, from Starbase to the Cape. And no, I'm not even thinking about them flying over Florida and landing at Florida, because that's a very far off thing. You also cannot do that with a booster, as much as everybody wants that to happen. I will see that a very hard thing to do. You
You're
will have
crushing
probably
Crispy's
to.
point-to-point dreams.
No, hang on. So one thing is point to point, and another thing is saying, hey, let's transport this very highly experimental vehicle over Florida, right? On their first flight, just because, right? When the alternative is, oh, we need to make a lot of very complicated stuff with barges and cranes. Like, I feel like the other part is a little bit safer, especially for a bunch of people in Orlando. But then also the physical limitations of actually flying the booster to the Cape. I feel like a lot of people don't understand how far away the Kennedy Space Center is from Starbase. And if you look at a map, it's 1,000 miles. You will need to go twice the speed of a Falcon 9 at staging velocity to be able to reach the Cape. Super heavy boosters cannot do that and also have enough fuel to land. I'm just gonna say that you will need some massive modifications to the vehicle. Anyways, going to the Falcon 9 fairing though, I spotted that in one of these launch pictures that SpaceX posted and everything. Somehow there was a Falcon Heavy extended fairing on the side. I don't know what they are what they're doing there. I just spotted that. I was looking through the pictures and then I was like, huh, what's that? It's not the first time that I see these weird things. But yeah, that's the picture. You can see there that logo, Falcon Heavy, perhaps even a US flag as well underneath. And it's obviously longer. Like you can see, it's not to scale, but you can sort of see, just because of the the diameter to the length kind of ratio, right? It's longer compared to the diameter than the one that you see on the right on the live stream for Falcon 9. If there was not all of that bushes and everything in the way, you could probably see it on this feed. But unfortunately, there's a bunch of trees and bushes in the way. But yeah, I have no idea what it is doing there.
Reserves. That's G for building on a wildlife reserve. But yeah, those are some tall boys in comparison to the fairings that we're used to seeing here. So that was a great catch, by the way. So shout out to you, Alex, for seeing that. Speaking of catch, if you were to try and catch it from Texas to Florida, there's your distance on a map. It's quite far, and that's going
1,000
as the crow
miles.
flies. I'm sure D can attest to the length it takes to go to drive from Starbase to Kennedy Space Center.
I must say, I guarantee that I get better fuel efficiency than a rocket traveling between the 2 points.
A lot less methane use, that's for sure.
Absolutely.
Oh boy. And yes, the pun was intended also because I saw people talking about anchovies on pizza, so I was going to go fishing for comments, but I saw all of that and decided not to. At this point, though, we should be seeing the rocket start to get frosty if all is underway for fueling. D, what else can we expect coming up?
Yeah, so there are several more events coming up. So of course, as you mentioned, there was the T-minus 38-minute poll where hopefully the launch director gave the go for launch. Then 35 minutes to launch, that's when they'll start fueling the first stage. And then at T-minus 20 minutes and 20 seconds, that is when we get the famous vent. That is as they are cooling down the lines to prepare them for liquid oxygen load of the second stage. That actual loading starts at about T minus 16 minutes. And then once it gets closer to launch, there are a lot more events that happen in rapid succession, including engine chill, the startup, yeah, and of course the big one is liftoff at 0. So hopefully we are getting close. Hopefully we are 33 minutes and 19 seconds away from that liftoff.
That is what we were hoping. And of course, we will keep an eye out for frost on the launch vehicle. That, of course, the best indicator that fueling is, in fact, underway, if not official X posts from SpaceX. So a reminder that that is that kind of window, so to speak, the sub windows, which Demian was wondering, is there an advantage to having sub windows as opposed to the instantaneous T zeros? Alex?
Oh, I thought it was. Can you repeat it again, please?
Yeah. What's the advantage to the sub windows that you were talking about earlier, as
Oh,
opposed to, say, an instantaneous T zero?
now see. I thought you meant the. But yeah, one of the things that I can think of about this is that they might try to optimize the way that they deploy these satellites, right? How they get into their operational orbits, where they are going into their orbits, right? That could be one way. Other can be things like collision avoidance, right? When you want to go into space, there usually are a lot of other things, zooming through space in orbit, and you want to avoid them. One of the benefits that Starlink has is that when it is launched into a very low orbit. For this case, for this mission, it should be a 282 but 291 kilometer orbit. So it's under 300 kilometers in altitude, right? The injection altitude. Then the satellites use their onboard thrusters to go up into their operational orbits, and that's very nice and dandy. But one of the things that is beneficial from that is that there's not a lot of satellites, right, on those altitudes. You don't see a lot of satellites at, I don't know, 250 kilometers or things like that. And so that is sort of beneficial. There could be a chance that these sub windows might have to do, though, with like avoiding other Starlink satellites, because now there's so many of them, right? That some are maybe still in those 300 kilometer altitude orbits. And then you start having some encounters and whatnot. And so the short answer is we don't know. The long answer is what I just gave to you, my very sincere guess on what it could be based on what we've seen with other launchers and whatnot.
There you go. Always love the longer Alex answer, so appreciate you going in depth on those. We are coming up now on 30 minutes to go until that launch. You could see there the towers blinking away with Falcon 9 in the middle. For those who don't know, D, what are the 4 towers? Gotta bring it up.
All right, I feel like we've answered that question quite a bit, but it is important for all the people new here to know those are part of the lightning protection system. So they have wires between them at the top so that if lightning is striking the pad, it hits those wires and goes to ground. That protects the rocket, of course, from any issues that could be caused from lightning while it is fueling on the pad.
There you go, and you'll see it differently on different towers. But one thing you can clearly see here is the frost beginning to form on the outside of Falcon 9. See the condensation happening?
Wind.
That is indication that fueling is indeed underway. And yes, 9/8 Central, the towers, they're talking about us again, aren't they, Sawyer? Yes, shocking. It's kind of like the wordplay that we have on the Four Towers merch at shop.nasaspaceflight.com. I really need to get that shirt. It's got a great pun on it. As Dee pointed out, though, that is the beginning of the loading of the liquid oxygen and the RP-1, the rocket propellant 1, into the vehicle. Those are both into the first stage. On the second stage right now, they are just loading the RP-1, which is closer to ambient temperature than the supercooled liquid oxygen. Love it when it gets frosty. And we actually have a question about that. Alex, I'll put this one to you. Khaled's asking, why doesn't Falcon 9 get frosty all the way to the bottom like Starship?
That's a very good question. It has to do with what both are fueled, right? With. And so Falcon 9 uses kerosene and liquid oxygen. So the liquid oxygen is actually the one that is cryogenic, that it is cold, and that it creates that condensation and frost on the vehicle. And so you don't see it to the bottom precisely because the bottom of the booster is the RP-1 tank. And so you see the suit, but you don't see frost. Now, there's a caveat here, and it's that the RP-1 is loaded still below freezing. And depending on the conditions, you might actually see some slight condensation and very small amounts of frost even on the RP-1 tank. But the whole reason for that, it is because the RP-1, even though it is not cryogenic, for the Falcon 9, it is loaded at a lower temperature. They subcool it as well. It's technically not subcooling, but you know what I mean, right? They load it at a colder temperature, and it is about minus 7 degrees Celsius, if I'm not mistaken, which means it is under freezing temperatures, and therefore water, the humidity from the air, could in theory become frost outside of the tank, which is cool. I mean, no pun intended, but I think it's cool that even a Kerolox rocket could in theory have all frosty boosters, all frosty tanks. But that's a very niche thing. Like it depends on the weather conditions. It needs to be very, very humid, and you also need to be very close up and very careful look at it. But yeah.
There we go. And I do want to point out some fun things again, because I always like to say this isn't your ordinary Starlink mission. And sometimes I say it jokingly, but it is true. I mean, this is scheduled to be if it succeeds, 100th successful landing on the drone ship, just read the instructions, which is positioned downrange. And if I'm not mistaken, the 401st successful flight, or 402nd, I believe at this point, second successful flight now. They just hit 400 recently, Alex.
Yeah, they did the 400th successful mission. If I take a look, just give me like 1 second. I think this should be the 400th orbital launch, successful orbital launch. Because this is the 402nd orbital flight, and there's been 2 failures of orbital launches from Falcon 9, which was it was CR7 and Starlink 9.3. So if this launches successfully, then it'll be the 400th successful orbital launch, which is a mouthful, I know, but since I see a lot of people care about orbital or suborbital launches, you Shepard, right? So yeah, I also do that.
Right, and again, it's worth clarifying, as you mentioned, you've got Starship and things which are suborbital, but this is the orbital that we're talking about here. So the potential 400th orbital flight, which would be amazing, and the 100th successful landing on just read the instructions. So a lot of nice round numbers potentially for this mission, including hopefully the T0, which is scheduled for midnight Eastern.
Yeah, and of course, since they have started this fueling, we can see it from the frost. That T0 isn't changing tonight. So they're going at midnight, or they're not going today. So
Yeah, why is that, D?
yeah, so they have to, with their propellants being these super cooled, basically the super cooled RP1 and liquid oxygen, basically the moment they start fueling it, it starts heating up, it starts expanding, and they're getting the most performance out of the Falcon 9. And to do that, they need it to be cooled down. And so with Falcon 9, unlike some other rockets, once they basically start fueling and they are locked into that T0. Some other rockets will have flexibility. We see a lot of flexibility from like Atlas V. It can sort of be fueled and stop at different points in the count and then move backwards in the count. With Falcon 9, it's a load and go rocket.
There you go, load and go. That's the SpaceX way. So yeah, once they begin the fueling, it's either they launch or they don't. So this will be interesting. We are coming up now on 23 minutes to go until launch. Here's an interesting question from Bloodhound with the super chat. Alex, when's the next transporter mission? Do we know?
Hey, yeah, so it should be in January. Hopefully, we'll see. It's been delayed quite a bit. It was gonna be in October, then it delayed to November, and it didn't even delay to December. It just jumped to January. So good question. I wonder myself the same. I was sort of laughing a bit about that because it's like, yeah, I don't think we know what's going on with that mission. But yeah, that should be Transporter 12. Ironically, we might have Bandwagon 2 before that Transporter mission. At some point, Bandwagon 2 is going to be in November. That's the rideshare mission that goes, instead of polar orbits, it goes to mid-inclination. That'll be from Vandenberg as well. It seems like they have moved that one to Vandenberg, and hopefully it should be towards the end of the year. Right now, looking like 28th, 29th of December.
And an interesting way to keep track of that also, for those who know Mark Rober, one of the big YouTubers out there, posting a video today that he plans to be launching a quote-unquote selfie satellite in cooperation with Google and T-Mobile. That is set to launch, per the website, on the Transporter 12 mission out of Vandenberg. So when that does launch, I'm sure you'll hear about it, and I guess you could check out his video for more of the details on the so-called selfie from space with your house.
That's actually really cool. I had not heard about that yet. I need to catch up on that. That sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, apparently they'll tell you when it's going to be over your house, and you can step outside, and then you'll technically be in the selfie. I mean, Sawyerflex, I do have a picture of me with a photo of myself taken live aboard the International Space Station. So I have a selfie of me with a picture of me in space already. So kind of beat Mark to it. Sorry. uh, but one thing that cannot be beat is the T-minus 20-minute, 20-second vent, and we are coming up on that momentarily. D, what is the T-minus 20-minute, 20-second quote-unquote vent?
Yes, so they are cooling down the lines in order to prepare for liquid oxygen load of the second stage. Of course, if you just start flowing that propellant, the lines are at outdoor Florida temperatures. So right now they're probably around 60 degrees. And with these cryogenic liquids, that would basically flash it into a vapor. So they pre-cool the lines in order to be able to start filling the second stage, which should start in about 4 minutes from now. So, of course, we see that gorgeous vent. It looks like it's coming my way just a little bit and moving out to the side. There's a bit of a breeze. The breeze has died down, though. So, it is a great thing to see. It means all things are progressing well in the count. It's a great sign.
Yes, and that the direction and dimensions of the plume, shall we say, are very indicative of the weather, which you see there on screen. A little cold, but that 85% humidity and the light breeze means that it's going to become a little larger and more visible and kind of move a little bit like a cape. So, a cape at the cape. It's perfect. Shout out to Apocalypse Cow for gifting 10 Red Team memberships. If you did get one of those, please make sure you give Apocalypse Cow a big moo and a thank you. And Flipper79 saying, to the best vent. I will cheers to that with an imaginary drink. Here's an interesting question. I know we just kind of touched on this, Alex, but Human just wants to clarify. What's the difference between the transporter and bandwagon specifically?
Yeah, so both are part of SpaceX's small sat rideshare program. This is sort of like a side quest kind of thing for them, right? Where they offer regular launch services to small satellites, anywhere from CubeSats to 500 kilograms and things like that, right? To be able to launch frequently into orbit, and in particular into low Earth orbit. So transporters started first, and those are to a sun-synchronous orbit. So it's this type of orbit that it's more or less polar, slightly retrograde, and so they started launching out of here from the Cape, but then they moved to Vandenberg, and since then have been launching from Vandenberg. In the case of bandwagon, this is another type of rideshare. So transporter only allows you to go into a polar orbit, but sometimes your satellite might not need to be on a sun-synchronous orbit, right? These sun-synchronous orbits are the ones that are usually same illumination every single day, right? Because of how the orbit is oriented and whatnot. Long explanation there, which I'm not going to make. But bottom line is sometimes you don't need that kind of orbit. You may want to have other types of orbits, especially mid-inclination orbits, allow you to be able to revisit some targets multiple times a day. And that is a very good thing if you have an imaging satellite constellation. You may not have the same illumination over multiple days like the sun-synchronous orbit allows you to get, but you can have multiple passes over the same area if you have multiple of these satellites in mid-inclination. So there's been lately some demand from certain satellite operators to have satellites in mid-inclination, so SpaceX expanded their small sat program, and they created Bandwagon. Bandwagon is that type of mission that doesn't go to a polar orbit, it goes to a low Earth orbit, but it is to mid-inclination, aka something around 45 degrees inclination, very similar to what we see we're going to see today with Starlink, because it's going to 43, just a little bit more to 45, and so that's what we should see from Vandenberg next month at the end of the year.
And typically the bandwagon ones from the Cape recently have been RTLS, return to launch sites, which have also been quite nice.
Yep. The first one was out from 39A.
And as we come up on the T-minus 16-minute mark, I do see some people are just joining in. So if you are just joining, this is Space Launch Complex 40 at the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida. This is a Falcon 9 rocket that is on its way to being fueled with rocket propellant 1, RP1, and a liquid oxygen mixture here to be able to launch. The launch is currently scheduled for 12 a.m. Eastern Time, so top of the hour, just about 15 and a half minutes from now. And if you are just joining, welcome. They should just be starting to load the liquid oxygen into the second stage, which is much colder than the RP1, which is why that's loaded first. They purge the line, as you saw, and now, with that vent disappearing, that typically means that LOX load is underway on stage 2. So far, so good, despite one of our good friends, Gage, traveling to Florida, who sometimes can create SCRUBS. I won't say the full word, but shout out to Gage.
You can't say it so soon. We've got 16 more minutes until you can make that reference. But Gage's track record isn't the best, shall I say.
We love Gage here. Does a lot of great work for our Space Coast Live cameras, and hopefully they actually get to see the launch. This, I believe, is a feed from them. They are slightly further downrange on this launch in the Martin County area, I believe. So about an hour and a half south. So keep an eye out for a potential downrange view as it goes towards the southeast. And there's Gage's info up in the corner.
Now, Gage, I don't know if you can reply in the back channels, but looking around here at the launch site, the cloud cover is pretty heavy. It seems to be like a higher up cloud cover, but most of the sky is covered in clouds. Can you let me know, is it like that down there as well? Gage says it is down there as well. So perhaps not the most visually beautiful launch, but hopefully that means we can get a good sound. If we get reflections off of the clouds, that would be awesome. And it's always cool watching the Falcon 9 go behind the cloud and watching as the flame, basically, it's like an ND filter. So ND filters are basically sunglasses for your camera. And so as rockets go behind the cloud, it functions a lot like that. And the brightness goes down and you can suddenly see a lot more detail in the flame.
Oh, it's a gorgeous view still. Everyone thinks, oh, it's the clouds. You're not going to be able to see much. If they're the thinner clouds, it puts on a spectacular view still. Which, D, while I have you, this is a really interesting question that I saw here. The Angry Engineer asking, besides SpaceX, NASA, ULA, Blue Origin, what other rocket companies are setting up here on the Space Coast?
So there are a lot, actually. There's Relativity, which we saw one launch from them, and hopefully we'll have a lot more from them. There is Via, and so they're perhaps a little bit of ways out from launching, but that'll be cool. There are Northrop Grumman facilities here, and of course they're working with, I believe, Firefly for the new Antares rocket, and so there are some facilities there. They're basically a Stoke Space, Ryan reminding me in the back channel, thank you. There are a ton of different companies that are here working to get their operations going. And so, yes, the news cycle is dominated by the talk of SpaceX and then ULA and Blue Origin, but there are a ton of other places that are working to get launching out of here, and I, for one, can't wait to see it. Having more competition in the industry is better for everyone. It creates competition, hopefully brings costs down, and there are a lot of unique reusable designs. So ULA, of course, they're going for their what they call smart recovery, where they're going to land engines under parachute and to reuse those BE4 engines on Vulcan at some point. And then with Blue Origin, we have propulsive landing on a drone ship similar to SpaceX, but they've got a bit of a different atmosphere and a bit of a different method of landing there. And then we're also seeing a lot more 3D printing being brought into space flight, a bunch of different ways to create new designs, bring costs down.
It's impressive just how many there still are joining. So the race is not settled. There are plenty of options still. And again, that's just from the Cape. That's not counting Firefly's rockets out of Vandenberg. That's not counting Electron out of New Zealand, as well as Wallops. Their upcoming Neutron rocket, also scheduled to launch out of Wallops Island in Virginia. I'm sure I'm missing some, just off the top of my head. So there's a lot. And for those just joining, there is a lot to catch you up on. So once again, this is the Starlink 6-65 mission, launching 24 Starlink V2 mini satellites into space, and we are now just under 10 minutes away from the scheduled time of launch. If you're wondering what direction it's going and can I possibly see it? Well, it's going to be going to the southeast. You can see there the trajectory kind of near the Bahamas area. So anywhere along Florida's southeast coast, if you have clear skies or even semi-clear skies, it's worth going out to take a look. Alex, for the booster that people are seeing on the right side of the screen that will be launching the mission, which booster is this?
This is B1083. It is launching for a sixth time, so it has already done 5 missions in the past, those being Crew 8, Starlink 648, Starlink 656, Polaris Dawn, and most recently, about 25 days ago, CRS-31. So a very diverse, suite of missions there.
Exactly, and a pretty rapid turnaround time too. As mentioned, just 25 days between its last launch and this one, which is always impressive. Of course, the big concern with these launches is the weather. DY's out in the field. How is the weather at the moment?
The weather is pretty good, all things considered. There are some clouds, and they're keeping an eye on that. The main concern they're also looking at was the wind and the wind shear. However, the probability of violation is just 15%, and the fact that they went into prop load means they probably think all things are going to be good. Of course, the actual wind gusts right now are about 10 miles an hour, and that's not a big deal for Falcon 9. So it's really just that upper level stuff that I'm sure SpaceX is keeping an eye on now, but honestly, it's looking pretty good.
Is looking pretty good indeed, and this launch with some fun numbers on it. They're 124th of the year. They are catching up to the space shuttle's entire career, which launched 135 from 1981 to 2011, and the 16th of the month. They're 50th since the last failure. The 402nd orbital flight, if it makes it into orbit, the 400th successful orbital flight for SpaceX payload there. The 220th launch from this launch pad, and would be the 100th successful landing on the drone ship. Just read the instructions, located downrange to catch that booster. It'll also be the 35th successful catch in a row since their last failure, which kind of tipped over, and the 212th launch dedicated to Starlink. And if you're dedicated to rockets as much as we are, then you'll love some of the stuff we have at shop.nasaspaceflight.com, especially our Black Friday deals. There are still a couple more days on them. Check out Print Mania. If you really loved everything from Flight 6, now's your time to get two. You buy one, get a second one for 30% off in the shop. All of the amazing Flight 6 stuff there. For your hoodies, hooray for hoodies, buy three and get them 20% off. We've got all of the missions, of course, from Starship. We also have a bunch of other SpaceX related ones, Falcon Heavy ones, other awesome missions that happened, beautiful designs. Of course, the Sonic Vibes for the reentry that was just released after the most recent Starship landing. Check out all the deals at shop.nasaspaceflight.com. Now we are under 7 minutes, which means engine chill should be underway, right, Alex?
Yeah, right now they should be wrapping up also the RP1 load onto the first stage, and that means we're going to transition here into the final few minutes of the count, where we're going to have that Stromback retract at T-minus 5 minutes. It'll begin first sort of opening the cradle arms at the top, and then it'll retract about 1.8 degrees away from the rocket to sort of, leave a little bit of space for then at T0 retract all the way out. So that's some of the things that we're going to see in terms of actual scene. In the meantime, as you can see there, we're also going to have the the liquid oxygen load complete on first and second stages. That'll be the last few steps of the propellant load sequence. Once stage 2 LOX load is complete, that'll be the end of the propellant load sequence, and we'll see the return of that vent out of the Stromback, clearing out those lines, making sure that there's no nasty stuff for when the rocket lifts off, because you don't want to have things like fuel on your lines that could catch fire and stuff like that. So we'll see all of those drainbacks and gas closeouts. Falcon 9 will enter startup at T-minus 1 minute. That'll be when the ground computers will hand over control of the count to the onboard computers on Falcon 9. We're also going to have, tank pressurization. We'll obviously have the go for launch from the launch reactor. So hopefully we get to all of that in just 4 minutes from now, and then we'll have a launch at T0 today.
And we mentioned the trajectory going towards the southeast. I saw someone asking if it would be visible from West Palm Beach, which is my grounds. So the answer for that is yes. And D, most of southeastern Florida should be able to see it. Most of the major cities, right?
Absolutely. On most night launches, you have pretty good visibility from a huge area of Florida, whether you're in the Cape Canaveral area up to Daytona, or even if you're in Orlando, if you look east, because it's a night launch, that flame should show up pretty well. And as you said, down to West Palm Beach, Miami, even the Keys, you'll have to look out, and it will depend on your local cloud conditions. But if the clouds are cooperating in your area, there is a good chance that you'll be able to see this Falcon 9 launch.
Speaking of being able to see it, I know you've got to do some final checks on your cameras ahead of the launch. So, D, we will talk to you after the liftoff.
All right, I'll see you on the other side.
And we are now 3.5 minutes away from the scheduled liftoff of this mission. So at this point, the strongback you can see there at the top is retracted. The kind of yellow claws that you see there are open and leaned backwards. And there's still a couple more vents coming up too, Alex, and they're all supposed to happen, right?
Yeah, and by the way, you can see some of those condensation effects that I talk about on the RP1 tank. While you don't see thick frost, you can see some of that condensation, and it's still loaded under freezing conditions. But yeah, we're gonna still have to see some of those. I'm okay. So we have stage one.
Is complete.
There you go. Stage 1 LUX load is complete now. So first stage is already loaded. RP1 and liquid oxygen complete. Liquid oxygen load will still proceed with a second stage for a few more seconds. It'll wrap up. We're gonna have the return of those vents from the stromback, especially closing out the lines, as I was saying before, and hopefully we get some good audio here of that go for launch from the launch director at T-minus 40 seconds.
We are about 2 minutes away from that. Of course, the biggest milestones coming up are at T-minus 1 minute. That is when Falcon 9 enters startup. So at that point, Falcon's onboard computers will take control of the majority of the count and keep an eye out for any potential issues. Of course, they're also monitoring in the launch control center area, where they will keep an eye out and give a go for launch, hopefully, at T-minus 45
Stage 2
seconds.
LUX load is complete.
And there we go, liquid oxygen load complete on the second stage. Falcon 9 fueled up, and you could see that vent Alex just talking about there, purging that last line as we approach 90 seconds to go. By the way, if anyone out there does happen to see the launch or catch it, take a picture of it or video, send it to any of our socials on X or Facebook or any of those. We'd love to see them. So again, the next thing that we're going to be listening for in just a couple seconds is confirmation that Falcon 9 is in startup, and that's the main countdown sequence here.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
There we go. So Falcon 9's computers controlling, flight tanks are pressurizing to their final pressures. Next up, we should hopefully hear go for launch.
LDs go for launch.
There we go. That's what we want to hear. So we are now 30 seconds away. I promise we will stop talking after liftoff and let you listen to the gorgeous launch sounds of Falcon 9. But so far, we are go for launch coming up in about 20 seconds now. At about 3 seconds, you should start seeing what looks like steam pluming from underneath the rocket as those engines ignite. That'll be followed 3 seconds later by liftoff of Falcon. So keep an eye out for that. The base of the rocket there by the trees. We have ignition. And liftoff of Falcon 9 and the Starlink 6-65 mission. Go Internet Satellites V2, go. sounds too good to talk over there as we are at T plus 90 seconds at this point. Everything looking good. They've passed through max Q, that is maximum aerodynamic pressure pushing down on the launch vehicle. It has pushed through that. You can still hear that rumble from our microphones at the KSC press site just a couple miles away from pad 40. Holy smokes, that was a loud one. So next up, in about 25 to 30 seconds, we should be coming up on a couple of events in rapid succession, starting with MECO main engine cutoff. That is when the 9 Merlin 1D engines will shut down, followed by stage separation. And following that, you will have SES1, second engine start 1, where they start up the Merlin vacuum engine. And as you heard, their nominal trajectory, meaning everything is as it's supposed to be, right on track. So stand by for MECO.
MECO.
There's
There
main
it
engine
is.
cutoff.
Stage separation confirmed.
And then
And vac startup.
There we go. Look at that.
those
Beautiful.
are all the calls you want to hear in the order you want to hear them. And then the grid fins coming out with a beautiful plasma. Oh, I love that. And then, of course, the fairings, which have been protecting those 24 Starlink satellites. Once it's in space, you don't need them. So what do?
Fairing separation
off.
confirmed.
And there they go. As mentioned earlier, there is a ship downrange ready to pick those up, recover them, and bring them back to fly again.
Yep, that's Bob for today's mission. And you could see there were no differences in the satellites. They were all Starlink V2 mini satellites, 24 of them stacked together. Sometimes, they fly mixed satellites, right? Sometimes they launch with direct-to-cell satellites. You see the difference in the stack of which ones are the V2 minis and which ones are the DTC, the direct-to-cell satellites. That is one of the things that we usually see when they pop off the fairings and you see the stack of satellites. You're able to see whether there's some of them that might be different than the others.
Well, that's a good thing, honestly. I didn't even think to look at that. That's a really good thing to keep an eye out for.
Yep.
And what's also interesting, if you look in the bottom left, the altitude number is kind of holding in place. It's going to rise up maybe a couple more kilometers as the speed slows down. You'll notice the speed will stop right there, and then it will start picking up again. And at that point, it has reached the highest point in its trajectory. So that is apogee there. So with that speed picking up, it is now on its way down towards the drone ship for hopefully a successful landing southeast of the launch site on Just Read the Instructions.
Yep. One of the things that I always talk about is what coincidence is it that apogee occurs around T plus 4 minutes and 20 seconds? Because I don't think it's a coincidence.
I mean, when you put it that way, also, according to Next Space Flight, this is SpaceX's 420th mission, if I'm not mistaken, as well. So just a subtle number there, subtle references from Elon and the team at SpaceX.
Yeah, if
But
you
the
don't
next
count
thing-
Starship, it is, yeah.
Yeah.
If you count Starship, then Starship 6 flight was their 420th launch. Which is very hilarious.
Yeah, that is, I mean, I'm surprised they didn't hold 20 minutes to launch at 420 local
420.
time. Oh, SpaceX. At this point, though, next thing to keep an eye out for will be on the left side of your screen, and that will be the entry burn. Alex, what is the entry burn? How does that work?
Yeah, well, if you are more of a Starship fan, you probably saw what happened with Super Heavy during its re-entry on Flight 5, right? How it became very, very hot. Falcon 9 is trying to avoid that. It's not built for that. And so it is doing this burn that you see there on screen. First one engine, and now it'll ignite another 2 for 3 in total. There's the other 2. And
Stage 1
main
FTS
thing-
has safed.
That's the flight termination system. Okay, that's good because the stage 1 is no longer gonna fly over any sensible areas. This burn protects the booster through re-entry, and it also slows down that re-entry as well. That's the shutdown. As you can see, a lot of speed bled off and also protected through that re-entry.
Fighting fire with fire, you know it. Also, the kind of direction of the burn at this point now, you can tell how many
STS has safed.
you could tell how many engines they're using. So I believe that was a 3-engine burn. Because it's a straight line typically when it's the 3 engines. And you heard there the flight termination system is basically disabled at this point on the second stage as well, which is now almost 150 kilometers up, traveling at 18,500 kilometers an hour.
And if you see that altitude going down, that is normal. That is the way that it enters orbit.
Stage 1,
It first
transonic.
goes up. There you go. And then as it picks up velocity, it also goes down a little bit to make the burn to orbit be more efficient. It's a whole thing with orbital mechanics. Maybe we need to make a video about that. But
If
it's
you
a
play
very
Kerbal
long
Space Program
answer.
and you go straight up and then have to point down a bit, you kind of get it.
Yeah, exactly.
So now will be the landing burn.
Stage 1, landing burn.
There it is. Look at that.
And you can see those grid fins working now in the thicker parts of the atmosphere to help steer. Once it pokes through the clouds, hopefully we will see the German ship.
Stage
just
2
read
is in
the
terminal
instructions.
guidance.
And stage 2, as it should
Stage
be
1,
at this
landing line
point.
deploy.
There's just
Landing
the
legs are out.
instructions.
And
Touchdown.
touchdown! Successful landing, the
Stage 1, landing
100th.
confirmed.
Successful landing for Just Read the Instructions.
Well, hang on. Correction. 99th. It is a 100th
99th.
attempt.
100th attempt, 99th successful
Exactly.
landing on Just Read
Next
the
one.
Instructions.
Next one over.
Yeah. And we should be a couple seconds away from SECO 1, which is second engine cutoff. And we will see that Merlin vacuum engine shut down. There we go. I guess that would be SECO confirmed at that point. So we call it SECO 1 there because there is a second burn, and that one happens at T plus 53 minutes and 56 seconds approximately. That only lasts about 2 seconds, and that's followed 10 minutes later by the deployment of those Starlink satellites. D, do we have you back?
Absolutely. How do you hear me?
We hear you great. It sounded like you heard that launch well too, huh?
I heard it very well. I saw it for not very long, but absolutely, it was fantastic, crisp audio in this crisp air tonight. And so, for once, I was able to lock off my camera and sort of watch the live stream a little bit. I had less than a minute of tracking there before the clouds really obscured it. But I do have a bit of slow-mo that I'm sending in the back channels that we will hopefully be sharing in a little bit more time. So can't complain. Every Starlink is different. And just like I mentioned, has the Falcon 9 passes behind the clouds where the clouds bring down the brightness and you can see some detail in the flames. You can see some detail in the flames from tonight. So I look forward to you all seeing that.
And we will bring that to you shortly as soon as it is in and we have all the replays loaded up for you. We will make sure you get a great review of that launch. I do want to thank some people for their support during the launch. Maggie, thank you for becoming a PadRat member. And Notai, thank you very much for your message as well. I wish we had direct contact with Elon Musk, but I don't have his cell phone number or anything. I do apologize for that. But you can always follow us on our socials, at least NASA Spaceflight on X, the Everything app, also on Facebook, Instagram, Threads. I'm sure I'm missing a few off the top of my head. TikTok, all of those. So check out the NSF socials, where you'll also get some awesome pictures and spectacular things as well. Let's see here. This is a really interesting question. I pointed out earlier that it's coming close to the space shuttle, which had 135 flights in its lifetime. A certain D-Pod Dolphin Productions, who needs a better username, suggests, do you think Falcon 9 will match the shuttle's total launches of 135 in just the year 2024 alone? D, I want to start with you, then I'll ask Alex.
Can Alex remind me what launch number for the year this is?
This is the 120th for Falcon.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. They're absolutely going to pass that. That would be my guess.
So 15 more launches in the next 32 days or 31 days?
Maybe we count starships in there. I don't.
No,
if we count starships in there, then yes, I think they'll exceed 135. If we don't count starships, sorry.
No, it's
Yeah.
all good.
So, just for
Alex?
reference, in November, they have already launched 15 Falcon 9 missions. So, doing 15 in December, for example, that will be just, matching what they have already done in November. But also on top of that, their goal is 136, not 135. I actually, I have this sort of spreadsheet, right? One of the things that I usually do is try to guess, based on the current cadence, based on previous things that we've seen with how they are able to manage their launch cadence, if that target is possible. Right now, they have some margin even for that. And it will not need to break any turnaround records of pads, of drone ships, or anything or boosters. And yet, we've seen them do that recently, right? We saw that turnaround time of a booster being broken. They've also recently broken the turnaround time for Slick 40 for the pad that we saw launched today. They've also recently broken turnaround times at Slick 4 East at Vandenberg. So, even though they could achieve this even without breaking any records, they are breaking records. So, I don't know. It's surprising me a bit. I don't think it's gonna be too much beyond 136, but I guess in theory they could have more than 136 if they were to break some records here. Tolkien, well muted.
Thank you. Sorry, I had to clear my throat there. Yeah, I'm laying flat, so things don't cough up right now at the moment. Recovering from surgery, for those wondering. Doing okay. But that's pretty ambitious to go 136, one above the shuttle's entire lifetime in a year. Next year, I think so. This year, I think it's going to be close, but not exactly. I think they'll hit 130. I don't know if they'll hit 135, though. I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think so. What do you guys think in chat? I'm interested to see what you think their final total will be for 2024.
One of my worries, if you will, to achieve that is that they have a lot of customer missions in December. And don't get me wrong, customer missions are great because they make money, right? Starlink, the launch itself doesn't make money. It's the services that they then provide, right? That makes the money for them. But but the problem is those customer missions, they are somewhat subjected to those payloads, to those customers, right? And so sometimes you see some slips of 1 or 2 days for Falcon 9's launch cadence. That's not good.
No, that isn't. But what is great is D's slow-mo, which you can see the replay of on the left side of your screen there. And also crazy that the strongback is already upright once again at pad 40 on the right side of your screen, just 16 minutes after the launch. So that cadence picking up, but we like seeing it slow down. So D, thank you for providing those field views and the awesome slow-mo footage that we're watching.
Of course, always happy to be out here for a launch.
Yes, and check out their social media if you don't already. Some awesome photos usually and videos get posted, especially stuff from Starship you got to check out. There it is through the clouds, like Dee was talking about, you get to see that extra engine detail. Alex, I love seeing that and love hearing you on stream, so thank you.
It's been a pleasure, and hopefully I'll see you all next time.
And of course, we can't forget about the fantastic Mr. Kevin Michael Reed pushing the buttons, pulling the levers, making all these views come from our cameras to use, which we appreciate everyone watching. So thank you, Kevin. I am Sawyer Rosenstein. I have been your host for today's launch of Starlink 6-65. Make sure you hit subscribe if you haven't already, because we do a bunch of these launches, especially from the Cape. Subscribe, hit that notification bell. It is free here on YouTube, and you'll get notified for the next launch. But until our next live stream and our next video, we will see everybody later.
And here we go. We have liftoff.
Propulsion continues to be nominal.
R68 chamber pressure looks good.
Doubling up. Roger, Atlantic.
Water towers fly! Yes! Tango down to nominal.
Flighting down to IFT off. Bring in ST off. Off. It's orange! 145! Oh my god! Oh my god! Decollage! Put that in the big bag,
343 unfolds to go.
Indeed.
We rise together back to the moon and beyond.
The methane would be igniting the flare, correct?